She had the smile America trusted, the walk of a heroine, the calm of a saint. On screen, Lindsay Wagner could stop a speeding car, leap across rooftops, and still look like hope itself. But behind that composure was a woman unraveling from pain she refused to show. The studio saw perfection. The audience saw strength. But Lindsay Wagner was quietly fighting battles her fans would never imagine. There were the contracts that trapped her, the marriages that crumbled, the car crash that nearly took her life, and the chronic pain that shadowed her every move. So how did the woman who embodied power and grace on screen end up struggling to hold herself together off it? Tonight, we look beyond the lenses and the applause to uncover the untold tragic story behind the Bionic Woman. The story begins in Los Angeles, 1949. Lindsay Jean Wagner was born into a world that was both creative and chaotic. Her mother, Marilyn, worked as a building contractor and occasionally modeled, while her father, William, was a photographer. The marriage didn't last, and by the time Lindsay was 7, she was already familiar with separation and uncertainty. The frequent moves and the instability of her parents' lives left her with a quiet longing for balance, something she would spend decades chasing. Even as a child, she was intuitive, deeply empathetic, and often sick. Doctors diagnosed her with ulcers caused by stress and anxiety before she even hit her teenage years. Friends would later recall her as a dreamy observer, someone who saw everything but spoke only when she felt something truly mattered. That gentle detachment gave her a natural screen presence later in life, but it also hid the lifelong tension of a girl who learned early to internalize pain. Her first brush with performance came by accident. After briefly attending the University of Oregon, she dropped out to explore acting, following an inner calling she couldn't quite explain. She worked odd jobs, modeled for small advertisements, and eventually caught the attention of Universal Studios. In 1971, she signed a contract as one of their fresh TV talents. She was not the loud, glamorous kind of actress. Her beauty was quiet, almost serene, and her calm voice carried a natural sincerity that casting directors loved. She began appearing in shows like Adam 12, The FBI, and Marcus Welby, MD, brief parts that hinted at bigger things. What people noticed most was how authentic she seemed. Even when playing the girlfriend, the nurse, the teacher, Lindsay never looked artificial. She had a stillness that television rarely captured. And in a decade of fast-talking sitcoms and crime procedurals, her calm was hypnotic. But no one could predict how one guest appearance would change everything. In 1975, producers of The $6 Million Man cast her as Jaime Summers, a tennis pro and old flame of Steve Austin. In the story, she suffers a skydiving accident and is rebuilt with bionic parts. The arc was supposed to end in tragedy. Jaime dies from surgical complications. But something unexpected happened. America fell in love with her. Fans flooded the network with letters begging for Jaime to live. It was unprecedented. Within months, Universal greenlit The Bionic Woman. Lindsay went from a promising actress to one of the most recognizable faces on television. Overnight, she became a symbol of female empowerment. Intelligent, gentle, and capable. The timing was perfect. The mid-1970s were a moment of cultural transition. Women were fighting for equality. Audiences wanted heroines who didn't need rescuing, and Lindsay's Jaime Summers embodied that spirit. But fame, as always, had a hidden price. The production schedule for The Bionic Woman was brutal. 16-hour days were the norm, often 6 days a week. Scripts were rushed, stunts were demanding, and there was enormous pressure to maintain the series' success. Lindsay reportedly performed many of her own action scenes despite lingering pain from a severe car crash years earlier. In 1976, she had been in a near-fatal accident that left her with lasting spinal and neck injuries. To this day, she has described the pain as something she had to coexist with. The irony was cruel. She played a character rebuilt from physical trauma while quietly enduring her own. Colleagues recall her limping between takes, holding her back off camera, and then walking into the spotlight as if nothing was wrong. When producers pushed for more, she simply smiled and complied. The pressure reached breaking point when NBC and Universal clashed over her salary and merchandising rights. Lindsay, by then the face of the show, discovered she was being paid far less than male counterparts in similar franchises. According to reports, she confronted studio executives directly, a rare move for a young actress in that era. The resulting tension nearly cost her the role. She was labeled difficult, though all she wanted was fairness. Off set, her life was no calmer. Lindsay married for the first time in 1971 to music executive Alan Ryder, but the union faltered under the strain of her rising fame. They divorced in 1973. Her second marriage to actor Michael Brandon began with optimism but soon crumbled amid long separations and competing careers. The headlines called them Hollywood's beautiful couple. The reality was exhaustion and distance. When The Bionic Woman hit its peak, Lindsay's private world was already fracturing. She suffered from chronic insomnia and anxiety. Her physical pain worsened. Studio physicians prescribed painkillers, which she avoided for fear of dependence. Instead, she turned toward meditation and alternative therapies. Unheard of in Hollywood at the time, friends say she experimented with deep breathing exercises, acupuncture, and even early forms of energy healing. But her spiritual exploration often clashed with the corporate machine around her. She wanted meaning. The studios wanted merchandise, posters, dolls, lunchboxes. Her likeness was printed on everything, and she had little say in how it was used. The image of the Bionic Woman belonged to them. The woman herself belonged to no one. By 1978, the pressure had become unbearable. Ratings slipped, scripts recycled old plots, and Lindsay's health continued to decline. When the show was canceled, it felt like a relief and a loss. For years afterward, she struggled to detach her identity from Jaime Summers. "It was strange," she said later. "Everyone saw me as this strong, invincible woman. But I wasn't. I was learning how to survive. Hollywood can be cruel to its heroes." In the early 1980s, Lindsay faced the industry's cold truth. The same media that crowned her now moved on. She starred in a string of TV movies. The Two Worlds of Jenny Logan, 1979. Nighthawks, 1981, with Sylvester Stallone, and The Other Lover, 1985. These roles allowed her to explore more emotional terrain, but the spotlight was dimming. Network executives were chasing new faces, and Lindsay's refusal to play tabloid games made her less marketable. Her personal life mirrored this turbulence. Her third marriage to stuntman Henry Kingi offered a brief period of calm. They met on the Bionic Woman set and shared a son, Dorian. But even that relationship couldn't weather the years of stress, touring, and conflicting priorities. They divorced in 1984. Her fourth marriage, to TV producer Lawrence Mortorf, was short-lived as well. 4 marriages, 4 endings, each leaving a different kind of scar. She once said she was drawn to men she thought she could help heal. That pattern ran through her life like a quiet refrain. Lindsay's empathy was her gift, but it also left her vulnerable. She could fix broken characters on screen. Real life wasn't as forgiving. During the mid-1980s, she began to withdraw from Hollywood's pace. She dedicated more time to studying alternative healing, exploring nutrition, mindfulness, and spirituality. While others chased fame, she chased peace. She became a vegetarian, studied holistic medicine, and co-authored The High Road to Health in 1990, a book that blended recipes with emotional wellness. Critics called it ahead of its time. But it wasn't just philosophy. Lindsay's shift came from necessity. Her physical pain, a legacy of the accident and the long work hours, never fully left her. She spoke openly about suffering from chronic fatigue and insomnia, sometimes going days with little sleep. Instead of turning bitter, she sought understanding. She began leading workshops around the country, teaching people how to manage stress, trauma, and anxiety through mindfulness. Those who attended described her presence as gentle but commanding. The same calm that once carried her through chaos now used to guide others. Even so, there were moments of loneliness. Fame fades, but the echo of it never completely dies. Fans still saw her as the Bionic Woman, a symbol of strength that didn't quite match who she was becoming. At conventions, she smiled graciously, signed autographs, and listened as generations thanked her for being their childhood hero. But afterward, she often retreated quietly, exhausted. The tragedy of Lindsay Wagner isn't one of scandal or destruction. It's the tragedy of endurance, of a woman who carried the weight of perfection so convincingly that no one saw her pain. For every close-up where she smiled, there were nights when she lay awake, wondering why she couldn't find the peace she helped others seek. In the 1990s, she transitioned again, appearing in family films, guest roles, and occasional series. She played nurturing figures, mothers, mentors, doctors, roles that reflected her off-screen gentleness. Her appearances in A Peaceable Kingdom and The Story of the Bionic Woman reunion specials rekindled nostalgia. But Lindsay no longer sought the rush of stardom. Instead, she found purpose in helping others heal from trauma, particularly women. She spoke at universities, community centers, and retreats, encouraging people to explore forgiveness and emotional self-care. She once described her philosophy simply: we're all bionic. We rebuild ourselves every time life breaks us. It was a profound acknowledgement of her own journey, but rebuilding isn't the same as forgetting. Lindsay continued to deal with residual pain from her accident, occasional financial challenges, and the emotional distance that fame creates. Yet she never stopped learning. She studied psychology, holistic counseling, and energy medicine, blending them into what she called integrative healing. For her, acting and healing were never separate. Both were about understanding human vulnerability. When the entertainment industry rediscovered her in the 2000s, inviting her for guest appearances on shows like Warehouse 13th and NCIS, she accepted selectively. "I don't miss the machine," she said in an interview. "I miss the connection." It was telling. For Lindsay, performance was never about fame. It was about reaching people, showing them something real in a world of illusions. Today, she lives largely away from the limelight. She continues to teach, mentor, and occasionally act. She's candid about her struggles with chronic pain, her commitment to meditation, and her belief that empathy, not strength, is the real superpower. At conventions, she greets fans with humility. Her voice, still soft, carries that same warmth that once made the world believe a woman could be both steel and soul. Looking back, Lindsay Wagner's story feels like a quiet rebellion. She came of age in an era that worshipped glamour and control. Yet she chose authenticity and compassion. She could have played the Hollywood game, but she chose healing instead. She could have become bitter, but she turned her pain into purpose. What she lost in fame, she gained in peace. What she gave up in glamour, she found in meaning. And that's what makes her story resonate decades later. Lindsay Wagner reminds us that behind every image of perfection lies a person learning to survive, not through power, but through presence. The girl who once suffered from ulcers became a woman who taught others to breathe. The actress who embodied mechanical perfection spent her life proving the power of being human. And the bionic woman who could outrun danger discovered that the greatest strength is slowing down long enough to feel. She may never have chased awards or headlines, but Lindsay Wagner's legacy endures in quieter ways. In the people she helped, the compassion she modeled, and the grace she carried through every hardship. When fans meet her today, they often tell her, "You changed my childhood." She smiles and replies, "You changed mine too." Because in truth, the audience that believed in her gave her the courage to believe in herself. The cameras built her into a symbol of perfection. Life rebuilt her into something more powerful, a survivor who found peace in imperfection. And that's why her story still matters. If stories like this speak to you, stories about strength behind the spotlight, about stars who found light through pain, subscribe, share, and keep these legacies alive. Because behind every perfect image lies a human story, one worth remembering.